Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jean, the Digital Events Manager at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. We are part of the Info Exchange Group, a not-for-profit social enterprise that tackles the biggest social challenges by creating use of technology. Today I'm very excited to welcome you to join Digital Governance and Leadership for Not-for-Profit with Belle Timby and Megan. So this webinar is part of the NFP Tech Series. NFP Tech Series is a digital inclusion features event of the DIF 2022 festival and is sponsored by Victorian government. So DIF is stand for Digital Innovation Festival, and Connecting Up is proud to be the partner. And NFP Tech Series is the features event of the Digital Inclusion Features Program. This event is sponsored by the State Government of Victoria, and as part of the Digital Innovation Futures Initiatives, DIF 2002 runs from 24th August to 7th of September. And DIF is delivered in collaboration with a network of partners, including Info Exchange, and is open for everyone to get involved. So now, before we get started, I would like to introduce our two brilliant speakers. The first one is Belle Timby. She's the owner of the Digital Services Lab. Belle has worked in the charities and not-for-profit sectors for over 16 years and has managed some exciting technology and communications projects during that time. Belle and her husband Mike opened Digital Services Lab, combining his corporate IT experience with her passion for social justice. She's obsessed with providing a great customer experience to every person she works with. Other than doing great works for the greater good, she has 2 dogs, lives in remote tiny town of the Malakuta, and works throughout Australia. And also today, we are very lucky to have Megan Putin, the principal of the MJB Consulting, with us. Megan has worked across the health and community services sectors for over 30 years and specializes in helping not-for-profit organizations with their governance, strategy planning, and risk management. Through her consultancy's business, she works with organizations across the countries to develop their capacity and capability to deliver on their vision and purposes. And there's a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. All lines are now muted. If you have any technical issues, please type into the questions box and I'll be here to assist you. If you have any questions during the webinar, please also type into the box and Megan and also Belle will get them answered by the end of the webinar. We really encourage you to ask as many questions as possible, and please be noted that your comments, questions will not be up here to the entire group. And now the webinar is being recorded. The recording deck and also the presentation slides will be sent to you in 1 to 2 business days. And finally, there's a little short survey at the end of the webinar. Please help us to complete that for our even better experience in the future. All right, now I'll pass on to Belle and Megan for today's section. Thank you.
Hi, Jean. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Hi, Megan. How are you going?
I'm good. How are you? Hi, everyone.
I'm good, thank you. I'm excited to be here today doing this webinar with you. Before we get going, I just wanted to say the acknowledgement. So I acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the first people whose lands, winds and waters we now share. I pay tribute to their ancient and enduring wisdom and cultures and their journey that deepens and enriches us as individuals and as a community. And I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. So welcome everybody. I hope that you're having a good day. Just to make sure that you're in the right webinar, we're here today to gain an understanding of digital governance and leadership. We're going to consider your organization's high-level digital needs, brainstorm some of your digital risks, and think about the policies you might need as an organization moving forward. We'll also hopefully you'll develop some ideas for communicating your digital governance strategies. So as Jean said with her very lovely introduction, I'm Belle Temby. For those of you who don't know me, I live in the tiny town of Mallacoota on Bitterwall country. I'm a bit of a serial volunteer, which brings me to present today about this topic of leadership and governance in digital technology. And I've led on numerous organisations on their boards, and obviously leading my own business. And I've ran a software platform in partnership with the Department of Education delivered into Victorian secondary schools. So I have quite an idea about the risks and the information that we need to know when we're implementing digital technology. So my business is Digital Services Lab, and we are a small team of professionals dedicated to working with charities and ethical businesses to amplify their online presence and better connect with their communities. We offer bespoke WordPress website design and development, website care and security plans, and bespoke software solutions such as learning management systems, member portals, event systems, donations, etc. And we also do graphic design, including annual reports. I'm super excited today to be doing this webinar with Megan. She's a confessed governance nerd, and she really knows her stuff in this space. I've had the pleasure of working with Megan on through the numerous organisations that I've volunteered or been employed at, and she has helped us steer the ship using good governance models. So Megan, if you could give us a bit of an introduction to your business, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Belle. So I'm based in a tiny town called Buxton in central Victoria, about 100 k's out of Melbourne on Tongarong country. Beautiful part of the world here. So it's great to be talking to everyone from across Australia today, in fact. It's really interesting to be part of this webinar with you, Belle, because as you well know, I consider myself a bit of a Luddite when it comes to the digital space. So I'm going to learn a lot from you from today's conversation as well, because I think it really is important. We talk about good governance, but I think to drill down into that level at the digital space is really important for people like me who sit on boards but aren't necessarily that savvy when it comes to governance. We need to step up to the plate and, you know, not hold our organisations back. In terms of you know, being up to speed with the digital things that we could be doing that could have a positive impact on our organisation. So just to recap a bit about what I do, following on from Jean's introduction and the information on the slide there. So primarily I work with boards of not-for-profits across the country, and work with their executives as well, so their CEOs or their executive officers or maybe the next line down of management, and just to help them to identify where their gaps are around their governance and their leadership and their strategy, and help them to work out ways of filling those gaps. I come very much from a continuous improvement background, so always looking for ways that we can do with our limited resources in our not-for-profits, we could do things, you know, smarter, better, more efficient, more effective. So I do that through a range of training programs that I run, both things that I've already developed that I can roll out off the shelf, so to speak. I also create bespoke training programs for people based on the need that they have, where that crosses over with my areas of expertise, which are summarised there on the dot points. Some of them. I also do facilitation work, so for example, running workshops, strategy workshops, risk management workshops. I'm just thinking about some of the ones I've got coming up in the next couple of weeks as examples, working through one particular board, helping them nut through some pretty tricky issues, so that's a really sort of tailored bespoke session that we're running there. And I also do executive coaching, so working with CEOs and that's that first line down of executive management to help them in the things that are important to them in their role that supports the organisation to achieve its goals through them as a tool for the organisation. So that's, in a nutshell, that's me and that's what I do.
Great, it's very important work, helping us detangle all the governance issues and strategy and leadership issues that we have. So it'd be great to take a little poll now, Jean, if you're there. We'd like to find out the size of the organisation of some of our attendees, and you know, especially for me, I might be able to tailor some of my content today if we have a significant number from a particular size organisation. So the options there on the poll are very small, being 1 to 5 employees, small 6 to 20, medium 21 to 150, and then large and very large, that you'll be able to see on the screen. Thanks, Jean.
No worries. So I'm seeing now about 70% voted. So let's wait for a couple of seconds. All right. 90% voted. So we just got 2 more. All right, please let me share the result now. All right, the result is on the screen.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so we've got the majority of organisations obviously being under 150 employees. So that's great. Look, I think what we're talking about today really does apply to everybody, but it's really good to know that. So thank you. And I'll hand over to Megan.
And we have one comment from Vicky. She's saying that she got 0 employee and 10 volunteers. Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. I think that poll's a really good segue into the conversation about what is good governance, because I often talk with smaller organisations and they sort of think, oh, governance, that's what the bigger organisations have to do, or that's what the corporate sector has to do. But fundamentally, we all need to do it, whether we're running with no staff and a team of volunteers or we've got 100 or more employees. We still need to be thinking about, well, what is good governance and how are we checking that we're ensuring good governance for our organisation. So I think at this point, you know, good governance is a term that I bandy around a lot, really. So I think it's worth people having a bit of think and coming up with some ideas yourself about what does good governance mean to you? You know, what are some of the things that you think are involved in good governance? If you can pop those in the chat, and Jean will help us get those through to me, and we can talk about some of the things that you've come up with and unpack some of those elements. So what are the things, when you think about good governance, what are some of the things that come to mind for you in terms of what do we need to be across? What's involved in that? What are some of the things that we need to, as a board or as a senior staff person in an organisation working to a board, what are some of the things that we need to make sure we're keeping our eye on the ball around these issues? So you've got some stuff there, Jean. Can't hear you, Jean.
I think you're muted.
So we've got some ideas coming through there. Can't hear you, Jean. Can't hear you, Jean. Okay, maybe I'll just start to run through some of the things that come to mind for me.
So there are some responses over here. Would you mind if you can go to the chat box and see those?
Yeah, I've got the chat box up, but nothing's coming up there.
Okay, no worries. So I'll just, they got some similar responses. So for example, Aaron is saying that the clarity, responsibility, information flow, modern structure. Mary saying good governance, regulations, transparency, relationship building. So Patrick, we got difference between governance and operational direction. Mary is saying risk management, that's a good one. And Elliot saying the purpose can be divisive in the community.
Yeah.
So that's the response that we are getting so far.
Right. Well, that's good. I mean, thinking about things like transparency, that's a really good place to start, making sure that we're doing what we're doing as a board for our stakeholders, for our members, for the people who benefit from whatever we're doing as an organisation, so our end users, our customers, our clients, you know, being accountable and responsible and transparent in what we do so that they're getting the best out of our organisation and that we're doing it openly. I think some other things to think about in terms of good governance are ethics and integrity. So making sure that, you know, we've got a good ethical framework that we're working to. We've got articulated values that underpin everything we do as an organisation, that guide the decisions that we make and the actions that we take on behalf of our organisation. Someone mentioned their regulations, so I think the whole compliance piece is really important to think about, whether it's compliance with regulations and standards and legislation, all those sorts of external things, but it's also compliance with internal things like our constitution or our rules, our organisational policies and procedures, our own code of conduct, all those sorts of things to comply with. I think key part of good governance is about inspiring and motivating and leading a team and taking people on a journey with us. Making sure that, you know, the hearts and minds of the team are coming along and we're all working together. So that sort of that goes into good people management too. So whether it's as the board chair, you're managing your team of fellow board members and getting the best out of them, or that you have that great working relationship with your CEO and you can work together collaboratively to achieve the best for the organisation. Making sure that we've got an eye on the finances too. I mean, that's a really important part of our role in good governance. You know, at the end of the day, we're there to have that stewardship of the organisation and make sure that we're taking the organisation in the right direction and being responsible for things like the finances. Making sure that we're not risking insolvency on behalf of our organisation, because, you know, the responsibility of that rests fairly and squarely in each of our laps as board directors. Thinking about, somebody mentioned risk management there, and I'll talk a bit more about risk management later in this morning's session, but risk management is another big part of our responsibilities in good governance. So it might not be that we're sort of hands-on at the board level where we have that oversight for our organisation, so making sure that through our processes and our guidelines and our policies and our procedures, there's risk management activities happening, I guess, at all levels of the organisation. So it's having that helicopter view of what's going on in our organisation and making sure that we know that things are happening as they should be. And I guess all these principles that we're talking about in terms of good governance, I think we need to then shift the lens down to, in the digital space, what are we doing around the digital stuff? So if we look at the leadership element of good governance in particular, I think that there's particular skills around being a good leader. And I think, yeah, that quote there, leadership, great leadership's not necessarily doing great things. Often it's about getting others to do great things. I think I never thought I'd see the day that I'd be paraphrasing Ronald Reagan, but there you go. But that's, I think, is quite a good quote. It's about taking people on a journey with you, getting everybody to muck in and be part of the solution to help us achieve, at the end of the day, what are the purposes that our organisation was put in place for. So in terms of, you know, what makes a good leader, it really doesn't, it's not necessarily about your role or your position with an organisation. Any of us can be a good leader. So if you think you might have somebody who's a junior person within your organisation who's really good in the digital space, and they could be a leader in terms of setting your organisation up to operate effectively and bring in new practices. It's about, you know, sharing ideas, coaching and mentoring other people through processes and helping them to learn and understand. You know, I think providing a good role model is an important part of good leadership, and that's where, you know, if you're operating in the digital space, you know, how you do that and letting others see how you do that effectively and sharing that information. Now, good communication is an essential element of good leadership as well. So, you know, how do we communicate effectively with our teams around the things that we need to be doing in the digital space? You know, providing guidance, being flexible and positive. You know, not all of us, certainly me, a bit of a Luddite, so, you know, not all of us are embracing the digital space, but we need to. We need to be getting on with it and taking it seriously and using it as a tool for our organisations to fundamentally be able to better deliver on our purposes for our stakeholders. So I think at that point, I'll probably hand over to Belle to go on to the next slide and really drill down into the digital element of this sort of governance and leadership conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think, look, it really is all encompassing. So everything that you've covered absolutely applies into that digital technology aspect of a not-for-profit organisation. And And so, you know, good governance in digital technology is all the things that Megan just covered earlier. It applies to all areas of an organisation when we're applying good governance. And as an individual, again, like Megan said, it's really about being able to sit around the table and ask the questions. It's not about knowing everything, or it's about being willing to research and know when it's time to trust others or to seek external opinion or advice when it comes to these things that maybe we don't know. So when it comes to good leadership in digital technology, of course, Megan's alluded to some of those things, and it's such a broad topic. It can go so deep and in so many directions. What is good leadership in digital technology? So this is just a 1-hour webinar, and I'm taking some pretty broad strokes here, offering things that you might consider no matter what the size of your organisation is. So one is around sector knowledge. So some benchmarking and some research in this area never goes astray. Understanding what people are doing in the sector helps you take a lens to your own organisation and to understand where maybe you're doing extremely well or where there are some gaps that exist for improvement. So as a starting point, you might refer to the Info Exchange's publication of their annual survey. They produce and have done for the last 6 years. Digital technology in the not-for-profit sector is the name of it. And the report provides a benchmark for all not-for-profit organisations across the sector and to ensure that they are using technology in the best way possible to achieve their mission. It will show you where others in the sector sit and may give you some ideas about what to focus on. And then if you have a better wealth of resources available, whether that be time, money often, then outsourcing for a comprehensive digital audit or participating in a digital strategy on a plate session or sessions, which is also run through Connecting Up, could be a great way for your team to learn more and really dive deep into all the different aspects of digital technology and providing that oversight for the organisation. I think number 2 is having a plan. So good leadership looks like having a digital transformation plan or an IT improvement plan. And if Megan is a governance nerd, then you could call me a bit of a strategy nerd. So ideally, everything you do is based on your organization's strategic plan. You'll plan how technology will help achieve your mission to build your organization's capacity. You might plan how you will market your organization, think about how you will take referrals, donations, make sales, run campaigns, and how this work will be underpinned by digital technology. And of course, you need to prioritize these things. If there is something critical to address, and unfortunately that's what most of us do, we look to the thing that's broken, and it does have to come first. We do have to fix those things. But being a good leader means that we're starting to have a bit more of a future lens and thinking about how we can encourage the organisation to grow digitally speaking before we're fixing a broken problem. So we can talk a lot as well about the pie in the sky activities that are completely out of reach for some of the organisations here today, where we definitely know that some of us must do better because we are putting at risk the privacy or security and information of others. So we've often underperformed in this area, and it's really important as a leader that we bring ourselves up to the right standards. So having a plan is one of the first steps of good leadership in digital technology. The other one is recognising and encouraging growth. So of course, it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to recognise areas for growth digitally yourself, but it's about encouraging others to share their ideas. And it really is a collective exercise through the whole organisation to understand where other people are at, what they do every day, what they've seen from other organisations and how they operate every day. So being able to share ideas is a great way to encourage growth in those areas. Then you've got identifying areas for improvement. So a good leader will be looking at what can be improved, and so that's either from a review of public-facing digital assets, such as a website, social media presence, or it's important as a leader to just raise it as an agenda item. So a good leader will question the systems, their age and their relevance. I've seen an organisation once hold on to technology that is redundant. They hold on to it and they start bandaging solutions around it to keep one staff member happy. This is not strong leadership for an organisation. It's a ticking time bomb, and we're waiting until a solution has disappeared, and that if someone else comes into the organization, they don't know how to use it, no one knows how to hand over that information, and there are no professional external people to use it. So that creates a really big risk. So identifying areas for improvement is another way to be a really good leader in the digital technology space. And then I've got information security action. So, sorry, security action, yeah. It really is, so this is the part that we often fear, and many are doing an average job at, I think, because of that fear. And I actually really sympathize here with leaders in this area, because when you look at cybersecurity information online, even coming from our own governments, it often looks and sounds completely out of reach. The language is all jargon, and it's easier to hope for the best than actually take active action, because honestly, when you read it, you really don't know what it means. What's ransomware? What's malware? How do I know if I'm under a cybersecurity attack? And suddenly you start thinking of things in terms of, you know, the Terminator, rather than what we really need to do practically in our organizations to make sure we put our best foot forward. So look, information security action, it does start with awareness. So awareness of people's privacy, their rights, and how you protect the confidential information that you hold about those people. It's even simple stuff at the staff level, volunteers and leaders having hackable passwords. That's leaving people open to attack. So if you've got a password set as your postcode followed by the number 123, or your postcode and your organization name, or your name's William and your password's William123, that's an incredibly hackable, low and easy target. It's the low-hanging fruit for people to gain access to. And what can happen is that when someone infiltrates an email, it's such a simple thing, but someone can infiltrate an email and send out malicious links that can break every single person on your mailing list computer down. So it's really important at that really super simple level. All right, everyone, we have to up our game. We might need to have two-factor authentication. I appreciate that's a real pain. But these things are how we protect the communities that we serve and all of the stakeholders. So that information security action really starts with awareness. So then once you know, now that you know what good leadership and good governance in the digital technology space can look like, it's about having that vision and strategy and noting it down. So on the screen here, I've just got some examples of goals that you might workshop with the team. So these are very, very common goals that all not-for-profit organizations are trying to achieve. So just being clear on what you want to achieve and why that's important is the first step to having a good vision. And in formulating your plan or strategy, you need to involve the people who are using the equipment, the people who are setting the goals, and the people who are working on the budget. So the goal could be increasing staff efficiencies. So ask the staff, what's the most repetitive job that you hate doing the most, and see if there's a technology solution to help them avoid having to do it all the time. It can start with the really simple stuff. And obviously reassuring the team that if you are making these steps, that you're going to have proper training and support for them, that they're going to be able to learn the tool. And that reassurance is one of the most important things that I find when I'm working with organizations and their staff who are quite reluctant to take on technology. So increasing staff efficiency is a part of your plan. Improving your service delivery, of course. So can you better save your time and increase engagement by the community by having improved your digital technology? Can you better connect with your stakeholders through digital technology? Another one I've put here is improving your website. And the reason I put that there is on the digital technology survey for not-for-profits that Info Exchange did, it constantly comes up that about 44% of organizations are trying to improve their website. And it's also one of those things that can be an easier win for you to get it over the line. You don't need so many staff to all know how to run a website. You can use external people. Sometimes you might have a champion within the organization. So when you have a great website, you have an active asset that works for you around the clock. It can become one of the most important parts of your team, and it can handle requests, referrals, donations, sale, providing information 24/7. Another common goal is improving the digital marketing. So like the website, your digital marketing efforts can be a fraction of the price all the time in adopting new hardware and software. Internally, it takes your reach further, so your audience, you can promote to your audience and tell them about what you're doing, and you will typically improve on your digital marketing each and every year. So every year that you implement a new marketing strategy, you learn from it and you improve it. And it's just that cycle of continuous improvement, which, as Megan pointed out, is good governance in general, enabling your organisation to continually monitor and improve. And then, of course, another goal would be to improve your information security. And I do have some starting point resources for you. So I've listed a couple of things there about knowing where you stand in your information security, and I'll provide links to those resources in the slides. The next thing that I wanted to just have a look at was digital assets and the recipe for success. So anything that you have online is a digital asset. And at Digital Services Lab, our recipe for success when delivering a website is based on these 6 key factors. And this can be applied to almost any digital asset you have. So you need a beautiful design. Your asset should be well designed, modern, professional, and responsive to your needs. It must have strategic direction, incorporating all your goals, financial strategy, and clear messaging. It needs trusted expertise. So you need to be guided by trustworthy sector knowledge. An audience focus, of course, whether the system is for the public or if it's internally for your internal stakeholders, you need to ensure that it has a focus on what they need and a clear structure for the rollout of equipment. It must have powerful functionality. It has to work smarter for you, not harder, and it needs to include automations and integrations to your other assets, and it obviously needs to be reliable. So it needs to work well, be fast and easy to administer. So moving on, having a look at some of the risks that we might bring back to our board or our teams, volunteer staff members. Some of the common digital risks that we have here, you can start brainstorming some of these yourself and maybe work to mitigate those risks, and Megan will talk more about that soon. But some of them are breach of passwords. That's what I was talking about before. That's the easy one, and honestly the most common one I ever see. The assets are not owned by the entity. So unfortunately, a really kind-hearted, kind-spirited person at one point took out your domain name, and you are at grave risk of losing the entire asset because you don't have access to that domain name. You don't have access to site files, perhaps. So you need to make sure that you own all of the assets that you're running. You can do searches for that to make sure that your assets, another common risk is that your assets are compromised by staff. So sometimes we give staff administrative access to all of our tools and they break them because they actually don't know what they're doing. So it's about monitoring the privileges that you're giving to people and making sure that their skill set matches those privileges. Another common one is the compromisation of data, systems interruption, data interruption, irrevocable loss, and cybersecurity threats. So it really is about knowing that these are the common risks and then writing down some steps that you're taking to alleviate those risks. And that's a good time to hand back to Megan to talk about how you manage risk. So what do you suggest, Megan, when it comes to managing risk?
Well, I think, managing digital risks is the same way as you manage any risks. And I tend to think about risk management 101 as just these 3 simple steps, which I'm sure people have heard of before, but I think it's really worth running through those again. So first of all, we need to identify what are our risks. So what are the digital risks as you've discussed there? Is it that you've got things already on your risk register that you've previously identified? Is it that you periodically go through a process of checking or brainstorming? Have there any new risks have emerged? Any new things that have cropped up over time that we need to now be thinking about and be mitigating those risks? Or it might be that sometimes it can feel a bit like closing the gate after the horse has bolted, but after the fact, if something has gone wrong, we need to look at what's happened there. What were the risks? What were the hazards? What contributed to that happening? Such as you just described about having weak passwords, or we need to recognise that that's caused us a problem and go back and fix it. So there's a whole range of ways that we can go about identifying the risks. I think it's really important to put the time and the effort into doing that, so you're starting from a really strong point of view where you've got a fairly complete picture as to what you need to deal with. So once we've done that process, we've identified our risks. Now we need to think about, you could have a list of 100 different risks, let alone, your digital risks or other risks. But how do we prioritise? What do we tackle first? So the way of dealing with this is some means of assessment. So I'm sure most people have probably seen or used some sort of a risk assessment matrix in the past. Just a simple table that the new standard for risk management matrices is the minimum standard of a 5x5 matrix. So the two axes on the matrix are, we're looking at how likely is it that this risk is going to eventuate into an issue, and secondly, if it did, how bad would that be? So we're looking at a table that we can plot each of those individual risks on that table, and it will then fall in one of the squares on the table that then has an overlay of, the most critical risks, the next most critical risks, the acceptable risks to take, and then perhaps the negligible risks. I've got plenty of resources on my website to help with this sort of stuff. You just need to get onto Google and Google risk management matrix, and you'll come up with a plethora of examples. But if anyone needs any help there, just reach out. So you go through that process of assessing each and every one of those risks, those digital risks that you've come up with. That will help you identify, okay, which ones do we need to tackle first? So once we've worked out which ones are the worst ones that we need to tackle first, then we go through a process of thinking about, well, what are the most effective ways of dealing with this? And I'm sure people have come across the hierarchy of controls in the past, where we look at, well, can we eliminate the risk altogether? Can we take the problem away? Oftentimes we can't, so then we need to look down to the next levels of risk control. So things like, can we substitute it with a less risky alternative way of doing things? If not, then the next best way to control the risk is, well, can we isolate the risk? Is there some way we can put a firewall around the problem that we're dealing with so that it makes it less risky? If we can't do that, are there specific controls that we can engineer? So can we get some sort of a digital solution built for the problem that we're dealing with? If not, do we look at administrative controls? So things like policies and procedures and guidelines that we can put in place, for example, or training that we can give to people. The challenge when we're looking at administrative controls is that we're reliant more and more on the people who are involved following the training that they're given, or following those policies and procedures and guidelines that we've put in place to minimise our risk. So looking at what are the risks there, which ones are the worst ones, and what are the best ways of controlling them. Then once we've come up with those important control strategies, then we need to put them into a plan and make sure that we're actually working on coming up with the solution. We've come up with the solutions, but we're actually working on delivering the solutions. So Belle, if you would go to the next slide, that would be great. So some of the ways that we can deliver those solutions are through, oftentimes it's about putting policies and procedures and guidelines into place to support people, to support our teams, to support our staff in how do they deal with certain situations. How do we, for example, what are the protocols around our passwords? What are the protocols around access to different levels of information within our organisation? So having those sorts of things developed into policies that give people the guidance and specify how we, within our organisation, how we tackle these things, so that everyone's working consistently, everyone's following the policies, and that's what makes us mitigate those, that's what allows us to mitigate those risks and minimise the chance that they're going to cause us problems. Now, the second point I've got there on that slide, after developing the policies, we've got to communicate them. There's no point having those policies, procedures, guidelines, whatever we have that's going to implement our strategy for us, if we don't tell people about them. If people don't know that these things exist, we can't hold them accountable for not delivering on them. So in whatever way makes sense for your organisation, explaining to people their roles and responsibilities in regard to these matters, and I think regular reminders as well along the way, because it's all well and good to look at the policies in the first instance, but if you know 12 months down the track you've forgotten it exists, you may not be implementing it effectively. So then obviously over to the other side there, once we've got these policies in place, we've communicated what our procedures are, how we go about managing and mitigating our digital risks. We need to make sure we're implementing. Oftentimes this is where I see organisations in a whole range of ways, whether it's strategic planning, operational planning, risk management, digital risk management, where they fall down is they put all these wonderful plans and policies and procedures into place, but they don't actually implement them. So they'll sit on a shelf or in a drawer and never see the light of day. So how do we make that real within our organisation so that they are being implemented? So how do we check in on the effectiveness, get feedback from the people who are using them? Do they need to be tweaked along the way? So that then brings us into the next point around review. So making sure that we go back periodically and we do check in, we do see if these things are serving us well, or do they need a bit of attention? Do we need to dial things up a bit, do things a bit differently? And particular touch points around that are if an incident or a breach has occurred, that's a really good indicator to go back and review your policies, see if there's any holes in those procedures and those guidelines that we've got, those documents, that we need to change things so that it doesn't happen again. And also, you know, things change over time. New technology comes out, it could be that legislation changes or, you know, best practice expectations change. That's a good trigger to think about, you know, maybe we need to go back and we just need to do a bit of a refresh to make sure that we're up with current practice and we're doing the best we can in terms of, you know, the activities that our organisation does, the way that we do things is the best way that we can. So I think that's probably it for that slide, Belle, if you want to go over to the next.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. And I thought just having some examples of policies you might use for your digital technology and some other helpful resources that I've put here as a starting point. So you may not be aware, but these slides come out and these hyperlinks are all, the ones that are underlined are hyperlinks to the websites that will give you more information about each particular point. So there's an acceptable use of electronic media policy that's provided by our community through the Australian Institute of Community Directors Policy Bank. There's an email retention and archiving policy, which is very important if you're handling sensitive information or working with government organisations. That's something that you'll absolutely need. I would encourage everybody to have one of those. A copyright policy is important to understand not only your own copyright rights, but the copyright that you might be breaching of other people in the images and information that they put out online. We do tend to have a bit of a tendency to just grab something off Google and then, you know, share it around to the next 1,000 people without giving the proper attribution or knowing that we had the right to share that. So having a copyright policy is very important. Website terms of use, obviously when people are engaging your website, they want to know what information you might be collecting from them. This is an absolute must, and a website privacy policy. These are two documents or pages on your website that absolutely need to take place. And then having, you know, really when Megan was talking about that, implementing the policies and what happens, managing risk and what happens when something is breached, one of the best things that you can do is have a breach or loss of data procedure / policy in place. So what are you going to do if you have a significant data breach? How are you going to communicate that to the people that have lost the data, a wider audience if people are at risk? It's really important to have those documents in place now before something goes wrong, because we get so stressed and in the moment when something does go wrong or when we lose something. Whereas if we have the steps clearly written down, you know, I guess if you think about the COVID pandemic, and if we had some really clear steps written down for the whole country to respond to all at once in a uniform effort, who knows what we might have been looking at. You know, that's just an example that I can use today. that if we had those clear steps, things get a little less chaotic. And it can just give you a little bit of space to breathe and go, oh, that's right, we actually wrote down what was going to happen in this scenario. And so then we get to follow that. And yeah, sure, you might need to adjust, but having it there is absolutely going to be a game changer. So then really understanding where you're at now, where your digital capability is at, and what you might need to put in place. I've got 3 on the right hand side of my slide here. I've just got 3 resources. So one is the Essential 8 maturity model, and the other is the strategies to mitigate cyber security incidents. This is through the Australian Cyber Security Centre. It's a government-run website. And it does have the jargon, unfortunately, but you know what it does? It actually gives you some insight into what you can do to mitigate those cybersecurity incidents. And that means basically people are maliciously attacking you. They're either taking information or they're trying to breach your systems, or you might end up in that situation of an irrevocable loss. The Essential 8 maturity model, that talks really about how mature your organization is. It is built for people that are using Microsoft Windows. However, it can be applied to people that are not. So you just have to kind of skip through the Microsoft-based questions, but it actually just gives you a bit of a benchmark and a baseline on some things that you can do, assess your maturity level. So maturity starts at 0 and then it goes up from there. So I think it can be a worthy exercise to kind of just see where you fit in. And then the digital capability quiz is something offered by Info Exchange. And if you don't know this, Info Exchange are run a digital transformation hub for not-for-profit organizations. You can get some free advice through their transformation hub, and it can start by filling out a digital capability quiz, which will go through a range of different aspects of your digital technology. So I highly recommend those 3 links as a starting point to mitigating some of your risks, or at least having some oversight and insight into what those risks might be. So I think that's really it from me on examples of policies you might use. There's a plethora of them. I'm just going for the basics here today. And we just start wrapping up here, Megan, and have time for questions. So in summary, we hope today that you've developed some ideas, you've gained an understanding of good digital governance and leadership. Hopefully you've got some stuff to take back to your team or your board, and you've been able to consider your organisation's high-level needs. We hope that you've been inspired to take a leap into the next stage of digital capability for your organisation, and thought about some of the policies that you might need. So Megan and I have both got an offer here for you if you're interested. I'm providing a 30-minute user experience / mini audit of your website if you want me to detect any problematic areas. So there's a direct link to book that in with me. It goes into my calendar, and I'd look forward to seeing you and having a chat about your website specifically. And Megan, do you want to talk about what you've got on offer for everybody?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Belle. So I've got a 30-minute offer to of a governance SOS call, as I like to call it, just to run through. I've got a 5-point governance check for a not-for-profit. So looking at key parts of good governance and just having a quick chat about how are you travelling in those areas, and any sort of tips that we can share with you to help you improve in those areas. As I said before, continuous improvement's a big, I guess, a underpinning principle in everything that I do. So I've got a link there. I'm not as I said, I'm not as tech savvy as Belle, so I haven't got the calendar link there, but I've got a link to a blog that I wrote a little while ago about that 5-point governance check, so you can have a read of it, see if that works for you, and then you can email me directly and we can work out a time to catch up and do that.
I love it. It all ends up in the same, adding value to the organisation and what they're doing. The means of getting there is no different. Okay, great. And Jean, do we want to go to the audience to see if they have any questions?
Sure, no worries. Thank you very much, Megan and Belle, and thanks for the lovely gifts for all the audience. I'm sure we are also excited about the gift. And I'll also put the links onto the follow-up emails so that it's much easier for all of you if you just click the link and then get the free consultation from Megan and also the website added from Belle. Yeah, feel free to do so. So it's the Q&A sections. Please feel free to pop any questions into the questions box. We got not a questions, but actually a comment from Peter. Thank you both of your very informative section. I'll follow up with your suggested resources. That's a great comment.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we got Sylvie. Thanks for the great overview section. Thank you. We are so glad that all of you are enjoying the sections. Okay, we got a questions here. So this is for Megan. Can you share your website regarding to the risk management?
Yeah, sure. So it's similar to my email on this slide there in front of you. So it's www.mjbconsulting.net.au. So if you go to the resources tab there, there's some risk management resources that sit under that. If you can't find what you're looking for, just shoot me an email and I'll help you out with that.
Okay, no worries. So while you're talking, I'm typing the address at the same time. So that's www.jmbconsulting.com.au.
No, MJB.
Okay, MJB. Yeah, perfect.
Just like the email there.
No
Oh,
worries.
.net.au.
.net.au.
Okay. Okay, so it's actually on
You
the
Google Megan Bunton, there's not many of us around, so you'll find me.
Lovely. We got some comments from Pauline. So it's a very good informative section. Thank you, Belle and Megan. Like it or not, we are all becoming digital.
I know. Kicking and screaming into the digital age.
Well, I'm embracing it, but some people are kicking and screaming, and it is
Yeah,
you.
you and I are the polar opposites of that, but I know we have to do it.
Absolutely.
100%. And we got a comment as well. So it's an earlier comments referring to, I guess it's Belle's slides from Jeffrey. For Aboriginal organizations, cultural appropriateness is also essential consideration. Sorry, I think it's Megan's slide. Yeah. So it's a comment
absolutely. Yeah, and that's so true. I think that cultural appropriateness is very important in any context that we're working in, and understanding who your audience is, and of course embedding all of that from hopefully the start of your organization, a strategic plan, all the way into every conversation that you have with people every day. Yeah, good comment, Jeffrey.
I think it's about embracing diversity in a whole range of ways, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
100%. Thank you. All right. Thank you for making it so interactive for all the audience and so many good words from all of you. I got a question from Sophie. So that's a question for me. So will the slides be available after this section at all? Yes, you're getting the slides and also the recording in 1 to 2 business days. So please also check in your spam mail. Sometimes it's just go to your spam mail. So we'll be sending you, and our subject will be webinar recording from Connecting Up events. So stay tuned with us. All right. I guess that's pretty much for the questions and comments today. So before we finish, is there anything you would like to add, Megan, Belle?
Thanks for having us. It's been great to talk to you today.
Yeah, thank you very much. Everyone enjoy the rest of your day, and hope to catch up with you again.
Lovely. Thank you, Belle. Thank you, Megan. It's lovely to have you both. It's our honor to have you. All right. So thank you so much, all of you attending to these sections. Oh, we got Elise, Alison, Lisha saying thank you. Thank you. All right. Lovely. We'll see you very soon. Goodbye.
Bye.